She spent her life serving her country. She survived the Navy. She built a quiet life in a coastal town in Washington. And then one night, someone crept into her home and ended everything. Brutally, violently, without mercy. They stabbed her 24 times, set her house on fire, and disappeared. 16 years later, her family is still waiting for justice. But new technology and a relentless team of investigators might finally change that. This is the story of Linda Malcom, a case that went cold, a murder that was nearly forgotten. Until now, welcome to Mind of the Missing. If you care about truth, justice, and bringing light to stories long buried, you're in the right place. Subscribe, and let's take a deep dive into one of the most disturbing unsolved murders in recent history, and the new science that might finally solve it. Linda Malcom was 47 years old when she was murdered, a proud Navy veteran. She had dedicated years of her life to service, working in military supply management before settling in the small, working-class town of Port Orchard, Washington. Located across the Puget Sound from Seattle, Port Orchard is a quiet place, the kind of town where neighbors wave, and people feel safe leaving their doors unlocked. Linda lived alone in a small yellow house on Sydney Avenue. It wasn't far from the water, and she liked it that way. Peaceful, simple. She had friends nearby. She liked walking down to the pier. She stayed active in her community and was described by nearly everyone as kind, dependable, and trusting. On the night of April 29, 2008, Linda was at home. We don't know much about the hours leading up to her death. She wasn't scheduled to be anywhere. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing that, on paper, seemed out of the ordinary. But at 4:45 in the morning on April 30th, a neighbor called 911 to report a fire at Linda's home. When firefighters arrived, the house was engulfed in flames. They fought to get inside, unsure if anyone was home. When they reached the bedroom, they found Linda's body lying near the bed, burned but mostly intact. At first glance, it looked like a tragic fire fatality, but the autopsy changed everything. Linda had not died in the fire. She had been stabbed violently, at least 24 times. There were deep defensive wounds on her hands and forearms, showing that she had fought back. The fire, investigators concluded, had been intentionally set after the murder, an attempt to cover up what had happened, but it failed. The scene was chaotic, burned, soaked, and partially destroyed, but not enough to hide the truth. What followed was an intense investigation. Detectives canvassed the area. They interviewed neighbors. They tried to piece together Linda's last 24 hours. But from the beginning, there were problems. Much of the physical evidence had been compromised by the fire, and there were no witnesses, or none that could offer anything helpful. The neighborhood was dark and quiet. Some neighbors reported hearing a scream around 1 or 2 a.m. Others said they thought they saw movement outside. But no one called police until they saw flames, hours later. And by then it was too late. Linda didn't appear to have enemies. There was no clear motive. Nothing had been stolen. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was personal, rage-fueled, and deliberate. But who would want to kill Linda? And why? One theory floated early on was that Linda had let someone in, someone she trusted. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no kicked-in doors. She may have been asleep when the attack started. Or, and this is something that's been quietly discussed in the community, the killer may have had a key. Investigators looked into recent relationships, disputes, money problems. Nothing panned out. There were rumors of a jealous ex, rumors of trouble from her past military days. But no suspect ever stuck. There was even a theory that the killer was someone passing through, a drifter or stranger, but nothing in the evidence supported that either. By 2010, the case had gone cold. There were no updates, no arrests, and eventually, the media stopped covering it. But in 2022, a woman named Jennifer Buchholz, a former Army counterintelligence agent turned forensic investigator, began digging into the case. She had worked on other high-profile cold cases and was known for her attention to detail and ability to spot overlooked clues. She contacted Linda's family, got their blessing, and began working the case independently alongside investigative journalist George Jarrett. And this is where everything changed. Jennifer and George began reviewing the crime scene details, and they learned something the public hadn't known. There was DNA, male DNA, found at the scene, likely from the killer. It had never matched anyone in CODIS, the national DNA database used by law enforcement. But Buchholz had a different idea: use investigative genetic genealogy. This process involves uploading unknown DNA profiles to open-source genealogy databases, like GeneMatch, to find possible relatives of the suspect. From there, you build a family tree, identify connections, narrow down suspects. It's the same method that led to the arrest of the Golden State Killer, and it's changed cold case investigations forever. They uploaded the DNA, and they got a hit, not to the killer himself, but to distant relatives, a family tree, a map of bloodlines. From there, the team began narrowing down the possibilities: who lived near Linda at the time, who had connections to the area, who had a criminal record, or at least a red flag. They eventually provided their findings to the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office. And in early 2024, law enforcement confirmed publicly that they are actively working with the leads provided. The case has been reopened. We don't yet know who the suspect is. An arrest hasn't been made, but law enforcement now has something they never had before: a real lead, one built not on rumor or theory, but on science. DNA, family, blood. And if the killer is still out there, their world is about to get very small. Let's take a moment to talk about what this means. For Linda's family, this is 16 years of heartbreak, 16 years without answers, 16 years wondering who did this and why. For them, the possibility of justice isn't just comforting, it's necessary. For Port Orchard, it's a reckoning. If the killer was local, and many believe they were, that means someone's been living with a terrible secret for more than a decade. Someone's been hiding, watching, waiting for the truth to fade away. But the truth doesn't fade. It waits. And now it's closing in. If you know anything about the murder of Linda Malcom, please contact the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office. Even the smallest tip, a conversation, a name, a memory, could finally bring justice. This case is a reminder that no matter how much time passes, the truth can still be found, that new science can do what old files never could, and that the stories of people like Linda, veterans, mothers, ordinary women, should never be forgotten. This is Mind of the Missing. Thank you for watching. If this story disturbed you, moved you, or made you think, do something. Like, comment, subscribe, share Linda's story, because someone out there knows what happened. And we're not going to stop until the whole world does too. Not here. Not ever.